Morning, everyone. In the past couple of weeks, days, we have gone through reconnaissance activities that we generally perform using different tools like Nmap, which is widely used for doing scanning and identifying the number of ports opened and also the operating system which is used in the target network along with services that are running on those ports and what can be the possible topology. So that is the like we do scanning to identify like what are the entry points in the network in the target system or and what are the services running which we can use to our own benefit and leverage those services and get inside the system. And then that is the general first step that we generally do, apart from going through reconnaissance activity on social networking sites or Google or other media that we generally use. And then comes like vulnerability assessment. So once we have identified the target system, target network, ports which are running, IP address range, and operating system which is used in the target system or target network, then comes the part of vulnerability assessment where we uh, assess the vulnerability on the systems. So all on, let's say we have the ports opened and we have identified the IP address and everything. So now the main thing is how we can assess the vulnerability on the target system and what are the vulnerabilities that we have. And then comes the next part of exploiting those vulnerabilities. But first thing is like you can ask like what is vulnerability? So it is a generally in a formal way you can define it as a weakness in the system which can be exploited to compromise the target system or target network. So that is a weakness that we can leverage to get inside the system. So it is a weakness in the system that we have to assess. So what are the weaknesses? So then it will help us to identify all the weaknesses in the system, and then we can think for what kind of countermeasures that we can deploy to mitigate those weakness or close the gap in the weakness. So that is the main purpose of doing the vulnerability assessment. So in many people can also ask questions like, is vulnerability assessment same as pen testing? So pen testing is different. Vulnerability assessment is different. Vulnerability assessment, the main objective of vulnerability assessment is to just identify all the weakness in the system. And then comes the pen testing to exploit those vulnerabilities or weakness in the system to get access to the target system. So that is the main thing that we will go through today. So we'll go through and understand the vulnerability scoring system and what is the vulnerability life cycle, and also different types of vulnerabilities assessment techniques, and also the tools we'll go through. So that is the basic thing, and also we'll see how we can use the tools to also generate, first scan all the vulnerabilities and then generate a report. Because when we are doing a vulnerability assessment, it is also important to have a good report once the vulnerability assessment is finished. Because without a very good report, it is of no use. If you have not prepared a very good report after doing vulnerability assessment, nobody can understand what you did. And you will just know that, yeah, these are the weakness, but you cannot explain it to your team or in the department where you are working or for the company that you are doing vulnerability assessment. So it is always important to do the vulnerability assessment and then generate a good report that you can use to explain to others, like what are the vulnerabilities, what does it mean, along with the countermeasures. So providing a
Rishikesh.
Rishi sir, you are not audible. Sumi sir, okay, some problem is there. Sumi sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, but Rishikesh is not. I'm
Rishi,
calling.
I think
I'm
network
calling
problem.
him. Yes, I'm calling
Okay,
him.
ask him to make it full screen.
yeah, the connection was dropped actually.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
so let me
And
share the screen.
yes, and please
So I
make
think,
please make it full screen, Rishikesh.
okay, yeah. And let me know if you have the problem when I change the slides. So this is the I think I was on this slide of explaining the objective. So the main objective is to understand the vulnerability assessment techniques, and what is vulnerability scoring systems, and also what is the vulnerability management life cycle. So all the different assessment phase, we will understand that, and along with the tools that we use in for performing vulnerability assessment. And also when we are performing these vulnerability assessment, it is also important to, like, after performing the assessment, to provide a good report. So there are, tools which also provide a generate a report when we perform the vulnerability assessment. So we will go through that, because and also you need to check that whether, the report is looks good or not, in terms of all the vulnerabilities that you have identified, along with the countermeasures, and along with, like, providing priorities. So when we provide the, like, maybe you can score it based on, like, whether it is high or priority, or low priority. So it is up to you to assess that once the report has been provided. So that is also one of the objective of performing vulnerability assessment, because it helps organization to perform and prioritize their task also. Like, they will perform risk assessment, and then they will prioritize their task, because maybe the risk is very wide, and we cannot secure everything at once. So we need to assess our vulnerabilities, and then we need to prioritize which is which assets that we should secure first. So prioritization is very important in security, when we are deploying security countermeasures in the organization, or setting security posture in the organization. So risk prioritization is very important, and you need to identify whether, you need to assess that whether, if this asset, let's say our email server is compromised, what can be the impact on our organization, in terms of, like, financial loss, reputational loss, because maybe a lot of data will be leaked, and then financial data, or like customers data, so everything will be leaked. So that can of course cause you a financial loss, like maybe you will be fined for violation of regulatory requirements, maybe you had not enough security, and also reputational loss, because when your customers will hear that, yeah, you were compromised and you had a very bad security, that can also damage the reputation of the organization, so it can eventually impact their business. So we need to assess what are the assets that we have, and the vulnerability that we have identified, which vulnerabilities that we should close them first. So that is the prioritization. So prioritization is very important. And many organizations generally they start with securing their perimeter first. So that is also we call that the perimeter of the organization, where we deploy firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and we also perform network segmentation just behind them. And then we also secure our servers that we have, like email servers, web servers, uh, database servers, or other servers that we have. So we need to identify our assets. Then we need to assess the vulnerabilities. And then once the vulnerabilities have been identified, we need to prioritize them, which vulnerability that we should close first. And then we should plan the countermeasures. And then that is also one of the process that we need to assign this task to someone in the organization. So the person who will be assigned this task, that person is responsible to develop the countermeasures. Or maybe if the countermeasure already exists somewhere, then you need to like plan how you are going to deploy those countermeasures. So many organizations for those tasks, they use ticket generation systems. Like once they have identified the vulnerabilities, so there are different document management systems like Confluence, Zira, if you have heard. So what organizations they do, they first, like, let's say they have done the vulnerability assessment and risk assessment. So they will put all those things, like all the vulnerabilities and everything with the prioritization in the document management systems like Zira or Confluence. And then they will prioritize those vulnerabilities and risk. And then someone will be assigned. So not as I mean, a single person cannot deploy countermeasures for all the vulnerabilities. So different peoples are assigned tickets for closing the different vulnerabilities. And then they will be given like the deadline for 2 months, 6 months, something like that, based on how difficult the task is. And then as a manager, you have to monitor all those activities and everything. So even if somebody is going for managerial roles, they need to understand everything, like how these things work. If someone is working as a security manager or anything, they need to understand the whole life cycle and what are the tools and what are these vulnerabilities. You cannot just sit and depend on your team. So for those things, having a good report is very important. So let's go through the vulnerability assessment concepts. So as I mentioned, the vulnerability is in a formal way, you can define it as a weakness in your system or in your networks. So the idea is to assess those weaknesses. So you will use some tools, or even there are different ways to do the vulnerability assessment. Active vulnerability is like performing some active scan. So using OpenVAS tool or Nessus and other vulnerability assessment tool that we use. So we send the traffic, and then we analyze those response and identify the weakness. So what these tools also have, when you will install these tools, you will need to download some vulnerabilities from databases like National Vulnerability Database or any other vulnerability. So they will update themselves with the new vulnerabilities. So if you have not updated this vulnerability assessment tool with new vulnerabilities, then it is of no use, because then it will miss some new vulnerabilities or new weakness. So once you will install these tools, they will update themselves. They will download the vulnerabilities from public databases, and then what they will do, when they will scan any system for the weakness, they will compare those weakness with the vulnerability database that it has downloaded. And then it will align it like, yeah, this vulnerability aligned with this one. And then it will provide some a score like, yeah, this is of high criticality, this is of medium, this is low. So the idea from pen testing point of view is to identify those vulnerabilities in the systems and how attackers can use those vulnerabilities to compromise our infrastructure. And then we have to, as a pen tester, you have to propose the countermeasures. So your role is not only to just identify the vulnerabilities or weakness and then report to the organization. You also have to propose the countermeasures. Maybe the person or asset owners in the organization who are managing those assets, they will think that whether it is possible to deploy these countermeasures or not. But at least you have to provide the countermeasures. So it also helps. So this is also from compliance perspective, it is required. All the cybersecurity standards like ISO 27001, IC 62443. So all the in these different cybersecurity standards, and also there are regulatory requirements that you have to perform these kind of vulnerability assessment periodically, and it is always recommended that at least you perform twice in a year. And if you have enough resources, then it is always good to be proactive and do vulnerability assessment more frequently, like uh, every 2 months or something like that. Or maybe let's say you have updated your system with a new patch. So it is always good to assess the vulnerability at that point of time. Because let's say you have updated your system and that patch has introduced a new weakness in your system. Maybe the plan was to close some previous vulnerabilities or weakness in the system, but the new patch that we have deployed, it has caused some new interface, and it has exposed the system with some new vulnerabilities. So it is always good to perform vulnerability assessment once you have deployed the patch, to also see whether the patch is introducing a new vulnerability or not, and whether the patch has effectively closed the previous vulnerabilities for which it was deployed or not. So and that is also required. And also from cyber risk assessment perspective, we need to do vulnerability assessment, because if you perform vulnerability assessment, you will know the weakness in your system, and you will know like what type of impact or how much impact it can cause. And then it will help you to perform the risk assessment more effectively. So when you will uh, calculate the score, like what can be the impact, what can be the resultant risk, you can calculate those things more effectively if you have the results from vulnerability assessment. So that is always needed. And then there are different types of vulnerability assessment also. For instance, active vulnerability, where you use some tools and perform vulnerability scan by directly introducing some traffic on in the network or in the system. And then there is another type of vulnerability assessment where we do it in a passive way. So what people will do and generally the auditors, they do that. They will go with some 15-20 questionnaires, more than that sometimes. And then let's say you have scoped your vulnerability assessment to some particular assets like email servers or database servers. So they will just prepare the questionnaire for those kind of systems. So first, uh, the idea is to understand what is the system, and then how many interface those systems have. For instance, let's say email server has interface with your web server, your firewall, and also it has interface with the database servers. And similarly, your web server will have some interface. So you need to understand all those interfaces and how those systems are connected with other systems, because vulnerability in one system can also impact other systems. So if one vulnerability is exploited on a system, maybe attackers can do lateral movement and compromise other systems. So that is we call risk propagation or threat propagation. So that is also important to understand. So what in the passive assessment auditors will do, they will prepare the questionnaire, and then they will go to the asset owners, and they will ask questions like what are the interface these systems have, whether these systems has host intrusion detection system or not, and which host intrusion detection system it has, whether it is protected with the network intrusion detection system or not, or whether we what type of applications are running on these systems, whether we have performed application whitelisting or not. So all those based on the answers from the asset owners, they will assess whether what level of security these systems have, and what are the vulnerability in these systems that we can have and that are present. So that is the idea. So that is like a passive vulnerability assessment. You are not directly interacting with the system, but you have a list of questionnaire, and then you go and interact, discuss with the asset owners. So maybe one team or one person is responsible to manage email server. So you will go to that person, and then you will ask all those questions and discuss with him or with her, like uh, uh, how it is protected and what are the interface it has, and then based on that you will assess the vulnerability or weakness in that system. So that we call passive assessment. So this vulnerability research is, I mean, many organizations, they do it proactively, and they always engage, like they have a team or in their organization that they will explore on the public platform, and even in deep and dark web, for new type of vulnerabilities. For instance, let's say we are using Palo Alto firewall or Alcatel-Lucent, IBM switches that we are using. So maybe we are given a task like to find all the vulnerabilities in the new version of Palo Alto firewall. So I will explore that. I will go on the different public platform, like common vulnerability exposure systems, which is maintained by Maitre. Even I will go and search Google, and also Palo Alto portal. I will go and search for any new vulnerabilities if they have found, because I should be updated on those. Because if they have found a vulnerability in Palo Alto firewall and they have published that on their portal, then I should update the system, or I should contact my vendor that they will update my Palo Alto firewall with a new fix or a new patch. And also, it is good to go in on deep and dark websites and see about the vulnerabilities, because many a times attackers or hackers, they are actively working and identifying the new type of vulnerabilities, and most of the time they will publish those things in deep and dark websites somewhere. So it is always good, like as an active threat hunter, to go on deep and dark websites and keep looking for new types of vulnerabilities, or even for instance, let's say for the operating system. So even for instance, let's say we are using Windows 11, so it is always good to keep looking for new type of vulnerabilities in Windows 11. So if Microsoft or any other hacker group, they have already published a new type of vulnerabilities in the Microsoft that they have identified through their research, then it is always good to like see if Microsoft has not introduced any patch, then it is good to see like how we can close that gap. If our vendor has not introduced or update provided a new patch, then maybe we need to minimize the exposure of that system by deploying, let's say, a firewall, or isolating that or keeping that system in a new micro segmented network, where it will be protected by firewall, intrusion detection systems, and access controls. So that is also one possibility. So you need to assess. So for those things, it is always good to be active in the vulnerability research and always keep looking for new vulnerabilities for the systems that you have in your organization. And maybe your vendor has not given a new patch because it is taking time, and then for in that period of time, you can think for what type of countermeasures I can deploy to minimize the exposure of my system which has a vulnerability to public domain or public internet. So that is thinking for what type of countermeasures we need to have. So it requires some critical reasoning also, you need to have the foundations of cybersecurity countermeasures and cybersecurity techniques that we can have. So that is always good to see the big problem and then break it down in a small fragmentation and see how you can resolve those issues. So many a times we cannot just go and ask ChatGPT for the solution. So you also need to think critically and understand what are the challenges that you have in your organization, and then fragment the whole big problem into small chunks and then solve those issues. So that is we do that when our vendor has not issued any patch or developed any patch. And what also happened, let's say you are actively doing vulnerability research on your own with your team, and you have identified new vulnerabilities in the systems, let's say in Siemens switches or Palo Alto firewall or switches or FortiGate switches, or even in the operating system. So the ethical way to proceed with those vulnerabilities to let the vendors know about those vulnerabilities in a detailed way. So maybe you can go to their site and explain that, and then you do not need to go on public platform like Microsoft Vulnerability Research or Common Vulnerability Exposure and publish those vulnerabilities, because those vulnerabilities and everything, they are published generally when the vendor has already issued the patches. So on those platform, it is not like I have identified the vulnerabilities as a threat hunter or vulnerability researcher, and then I'm going and publish that those vulnerabilities directly on those platform. It is always like, first we need to inform our vendors who are managing or who are responsible for those systems, or from where we have bought those systems. Like if it is Windows 11, then we should inform Microsoft. If it is Siemens switches, we should inform Siemens, and then they will develop the patch. So maybe based on let's say criticality, if it is of high criticality, they will give it priority, but maybe it can take 1 week, 2 weeks, or even 3 weeks of time. So we should wait till that period of time, and we should think for what type of countermeasures we can deploy for that 3 months of 3 weeks of period, or for 1 month or 2 months, and isolate that system from public exposure. And then once the vulnerability, the fix of is has been provided or patch has been provided, we need to deploy the patch, and then we should again assess the vulnerability, whether it is present or not, or whether it has been effectively mitigated. And once we are sure that yeah, it has been mitigated, then we can go on those public platform like Microsoft Vulnerability Research or National Vulnerability Database maintained by NIST in the US, or CV, which is maintained by Maitre, and then publish that in those vulnerability. Because let's say many organizations who are using those equipments from Siemens or from Palo Alto or any other vendors, maybe they have not been informed about that, because they do not know, or they do not have enough resources to perform active vulnerability research. Not every organization has enough resources to do that. So they rely on some other organizations who are actively working on these parts, and then they publish those results on these kind of portals. And then those other organizations can go and actively check those portals. And then if they have found that, yeah, this vulnerability is present, then let's say, and go and ask our vendors to provide the patch. So maybe the vendor has already introduced the patch, so you can go and just buy the patch and deploy it to mitigate those vulnerabilities. So in this one also, in many organizations, what happens, so those fix or patch is very expensive to deploy, depending on what kind of equipment that we have. So what organization will do, they will think that, yeah, this is too expensive to buy and then deploy this patch. So what they will do, they will think for what is optimized countermeasure. So maybe they will think that, yeah, let's keep this system in a separate network and deploy firewall, and then we will also do application whitelisting, and then we will keep this system secure. So they think that, yeah, for many organization, it can be like this vulnerability is not uh, much important, because they think that, yeah, it cannot, even if attackers go and exploit, compromise, take the confidential information, it is of no use. Maybe, for instance, let's say an example of shipping company where they have found a new vulnerability in the engine control system, and they think that to go and ask for a update from our vendor, it is too expensive and it is too complicated to deploy. We will have to do a lot of configuration change and a lot of change that we need to do. So they think that, yeah, let's do application whitelisting and deploy a firewall in front of that and isolate that system a bit. And then they think that that should be enough, because even if attackers, let's say, steal confidential information about the fuel consumption and anything, it is of no use to them. So maybe, as an organization, we have to assess the vulnerability also, how much it impact that this vulnerability can cause. So maybe that vulnerability is very important for a organization who is working in financial sector. So for financial sector, confidentiality is very important. Because if transaction details or any other financial detail, if they are leaked, it can be a huge, it can cause a huge damage to those organizations. So as an organization also, we need to assess whether we need to go and ask our vendors for a new patch or not. So maybe this vulnerability is of not that much of important to us, because main purpose of our system is to that they should be available all the time, and confidentiality is not that important, and this vulnerability can only impact confidentiality. So then I will go with I will not deploy the patch if it is too expensive. So that is also like, once you have found the new vulnerability, then you need to also speak and talk to different people in your organization whether this vulnerability can have any impact on our organization, on our systems or not. So these are the different resources for vulnerability research, like Microsoft Vulnerability Research. You can go and check that. Dark reading. This is also dark reading is very good platform to know about new vulnerabilities, and also the new type of security countermeasures and active cybersecurity research. You can go and check that on dark reading. Security Tracker and Trend Micro is also a good platform for finding new vulnerabilities, because many or security researchers in many universities and organizations, they actively do research, and once they have identified something, they publish on these portals also. So it is good to go and check these resources also. So what is vulnerability assessment? So as I mentioned already, that the main objective of vulnerability assessment is to perform in-depth investigation and then identify what are the weaknesses that are present in my systems, and then give some ranking or prioritize those vulnerabilities, like whether it is of high priority or medium priority or very low priority, depending on how much impact this vulnerability can cause to our organization. So if it is it cannot cause a lot of damage, then I will just rate it as a low. But if that vulnerability can like cause the shutdown of power plant or any other thing, then that is a really major concern, and we should be very serious about that, and we should think for like what type of countermeasures that we can deploy to mitigate those vulnerabilities. So as you can see here, it helps us to identify and then quantify those vulnerability and rank them. So whether maybe let's say you have done the vulnerability assessment on your email server, and then you have identified 15 vulnerabilities. So you need to rank them depending on how much impact it can cause. So maybe not all 15 vulnerability needs close attention. So let's say the main vulnerabilities are like 5 critical vulnerabilities that are which can really damage the availability of email server. If email server is not available, we cannot speak to customers, or we cannot take their request, and also we cannot communicate in the organization. Then that is a really serious issue. So we should rank them. So if let's say we have identified 5 critical vulnerabilities, then we should give them more priority, and we should try to close those vulnerability between like 5 to 10 days maximum, or even shorter in a more shorter period. And then we can definitely assess what kind of risk it can introduce if we introduce the patch later on. And then we should again do the vulnerability assessment. So these are the main vulnerability scanners. There are different vulnerability scanners like OpenVAS, Nessus, and Expose. So what it does, it identifies the operating system which are running on the target system, like IP and transmission control protocol and ports that are listening. So it is also possible to identify this through Nmap, but it gives more information. Applications which are installed on the computers on those systems, and it will also identify what type of accounts that we have on those systems, and whether they have weak password, strong password, or no password. And then the files and folder permissions, it will check whether they have the weak permission or strong permission set. And then the default services and applications that might have to be uninstalled. So maybe there are services and applications uh, uh, installed on those systems which is of no use, or maybe they have reached the end of life. So we should definitely uninstall them. So if there are services or applications which are no longer maintained by the any vendors from where we have bought those, and they have those versions has already reached the end of life, then definitely we should uninstall them, or ask our vendor to provide a new update for that. And then the errors in the security configurations. So many a times security breach occurs mainly because of misconfiguration in the systems. Many organizations, they have the firewall, routers, access control mechanisms, multi-factor authentications, and also application whitelisting, everything they have, but still cyber attack happen on those organizations, and many organizations, they are compromised. And many organizations, they do not know for a long time, for 4 or 5 months, that they have already been compromised. So that is mainly because of security misconfigurations. So we should always look for what type of misconfigurations that are common and that are present in our system that can cause our systems to be compromised. So vulnerability assessment helps in identifying those security misconfigurations. And also like average general time to identify the cybersecurity breach is like, in many organizations, it is 6 to 7 months. So it takes them a very long time to identify that they have already been compromised. And that is also because of lack of enough resources. They do not have enough resources to monitor everything. And also it is caused by let's say they have already intrusion detection system and firewalls, and those devices generate logs. So whenever a new cybersecurity breach or new incident will happen, definitely firewall and intrusion detection systems, or your routers, and even your systems like host systems, the servers, they will generate the logs. But there is nobody we have given the roles and responsibility to analyze those logs. Or maybe the SOC analyst who are responsible, or the person who is responsible for analyzing those logs, the person is overwhelmed, or a huge volume of logs are getting generated every day, so they are like missing a lot of vulnerabilities, I mean logs analysis. So that also caused them that attack or breach has already happened, because they are not actively analyzing the logs every day. And then after 6 to 7 months, if something serious issue happens or serious incident happens, like let's say attackers steal a lot of email address and passwords, and also other confidential details, trade secrets, and then once they have exfiltrated those information, then suddenly somebody will notice that. But if they are silently sitting in their infrastructure and just monitoring or observing the activities, then nobody will notice that, because they are not analyzing the logs, because they are overwhelmed, and and also because of a huge volume of logs generated by different devices, they many a times they miss some logs, and those activities, malicious activities, go unnoticed. So that's why it takes 6 to 7 months, even more than that, for most of the organization to detect any cyber breach. And that also happened in the case of Ukrainian power grid attack, which happened in 2015. So attackers already compromised their infrastructure in the spring, in the March. And then for 6 7 months, they were just observing all the activities, and they collected all type of informations like uh, password, and other user credentials, and also they observed and analyzed the topology of the infrastructure, like how the IT systems are connected with the SCADA systems, and what are the exceptions for accessing. So there were some exceptions in their firewall, which provides used to provide the accessibility from their IT infrastructure to the SCADA infrastructure. So they identified all these things, and they collected all the user credentials. And then just in December, a couple of days before Christmas, they launched the attack. So for 8 months, the compromise was unnoticed by the company, because nobody was responsible to analyze the logs. Even they had the intrusion detection system and firewalls. So that is you can look for these kind of reports in Trend Micron report or Cloud Strike and everything. That most of the organization, it takes 6 to 7 months to notice any type of cybersecurity breach. And then this kind of vulnerability assessment, it will also identify the end of life, or end of life of software information, or operating system informations. So all those informations, it will identify weakness, identify, and then it will assess, I mean, those vulnerabilities, and provide the ranking, like whether it is of high criticality, medium priority, or low priority, and what type of countermeasures that we should deploy to mitigate those weakness in these systems. So I think I already mentioned about this approach to vulnerability scanning. That active scanning is like directly interacting with the target system by using some tool, and introducing the some kind of attack traffic or normal traffic, and then we analyze those kind of response provided by the systems, and then we identify the vulnerabilities or weakness. So that is active scanning. And then the passive scanning is just without directly interacting with the systems, we observe the infrastructure, and we have a lot of questionnaire that we prepare, and then we go and ask our like asset owners. And also what we will do, we will just silently observing the traffic by using some tools like TCP view or Wireshark, and just passively scanning those, observing those information, and see what type of weakness that we can find in the system. But general way is to prepare a questionnaire and then go and ask the asset owners about the vulnerabilities or like weakness based on those questionnaires, and then they will answer that, and then we will assess the weakness about the system. So vulnerability assessment, it has also the limitations. So they are the these are the softwares that have been developed by some organization. So it also depend like how much they are updated. So whether we have updated these vulnerability assessment tools or not in the past couple of weeks or couple of months. If we have not updated those vulnerability assessment tools, and just we are using that, then it is of no use. Maybe in the 2 months of time, a lot of vulnerabilities have been posted on public platforms. And if we have not updated it with the new repositories or new database, then it will just scan what information it has stored into 2 months or 3 months ago. So we should always keep updating these vulnerability assessment tools with new databases of vulnerabilities. And also these are the tools which are developed by some organization. So whether they have performed good software development practices or not within their organization. So if they have not performed, then it will also impact these tools. So if they have not performed the code review, proper code review, and they have not followed the security best practices while developing these tools, that can also impact these tools. And when we will use these tools, it will be like our results will be impacted by those limitations. So it is always good when we are developing these kind of tools or any applications to perform the, security best practices and secure coding review, that should be always done. And vulnerability assessment, the idea is the main objective is not to identify or measure the strength of security controls, but whether we have the weaknesses present in the system or not. So that is the main objective. It is not, I mean, we do not perform vulnerability assessment to measure the strength of security controls. For that, we do the pen testing, and we try to exploit those weakness in the system and try to see whether we can get inside the system or not. So pen testing, it measures the strength of the security controls, but vulnerability assessment, it does not measure any strength of security controls. It just identifies, yeah, these are the vulnerabilities which are present in the systems. And then it will give you the countermeasures that you can deploy to close those vulnerabilities and make your system more secure. So these are the vulnerability scoring system and database that you can go through: common vulnerability scoring systems, common vulnerability and exposure, national vulnerability and database NVD, which is maintained by NIST. So CVE is maintained by your Maitri Corporation. So I will just show it quickly. You can see it here. Let me share the screen. So I think you can see the my browser. So this is Common Vulnerability Scoring System version 4.0 calculator. So what it will help you, it will help you in calculating and providing a score to vulnerabilities that you think is present in the system. So it will rate it in between from 0 to 10. So these are, for instance, you see here, these are the attack vectors. So this is attack vector. So let's say it is a network based attack vector. So attack vector is like the technique. And then let's say what is the attack complexity? So let's say we rate it as high. and attack requirement is already present. So maybe that is already there in the system. And let's say what type of privilege is required. So the privilege is required, that is also high. User interaction is also high. So these are the attack vectors is like it identifies the technique that is used. So it is a network based. Then the complexity, attack requirement, whether it is present or not, privilege, it is required, how much privilege is required. So let's say it is high, maybe because it requires admin rights. And then what type of impact metrics that we have. So here you see this is the exploitability metrics. That is the base metrics that you see here. These are the base metrics, exploitability metrics. So that is the network exploitability, and then the attack complexity that we identified, and privileges required. And then what type of impact that it can cause. So that is the vulnerable system impact metrics. So let's say it will cause a high, let's give it low here. Integrity is also low, but availability is high. Let's give the availability high. And then what are there? These are the subsequent impact metrics. Confidentiality. So the vulnerable system impact metrics, and these are the yeah, these are also low. Availability, let's say high. And then these are the some supplemental metrics, which is like optional. You can select it or not. So let's ignore that. And then we have the environmental metrics. So environmental metrics is like attack vectors that you have to provide. Let's say this is networks. So many things are optional. So environment, let's say attack complexity is also high. Attack requirement is already present. Privilege required is high. User interaction active. Then again, the confidentiality, let's say, give it low. Integrity. So you can select these metrics depending on how you assess your system. I'm just giving an example. So subsequent impact, let's say confidentiality high, integrity high, availability high, also give it. So environmental requirements. So this was environmental. These were the modified base metrics, and so security requirements. So these are security requirements, and then these are the modified base metrics. Base metrics. So security requirements, let's say give it high, integrity medium. I'm just giving it a random. And then the exploit maturity it can be attacked. So based on all those assessment that I have provided for a particular vulnerability, let's say it gives me a score of 5.5, which it says that, yeah, it is medium. So this depends how you assess your vulnerability score for your organization. For some organization, it can be a different, like the same vulnerability can cause a different score for a particular organization, and for other organization it can cause different. Like maybe for one organization it is of high, and some organization it is medium, or some organization it is low. So depending on the nature of vulnerability and how much impact it can cause to a particular organization. So if the nature of vulnerability is like in general is like it can impact confidentiality, let's say. So it can cause some attackers to get inside our infrastructure and steal the confidential information. So maybe for organization who are working in financial sector, it can be of high impact. But organization who are working in manufacturing sector, like power plant or uh, aircraft, or let's say in the shipping industry, it can cause medium or low impact, because for those industry availability is their major concern. Confidentiality doesn't matter. So let's say for a particular organization, what this vulnerability can cause, it can cause attackers to steal the source code or other information, confidential information. And for a maritime industry or for power plant, those algorithm doesn't matter a lot. If their system is running actively and if it is not down, so that is the major concern. So they can rate the same vulnerability score as a medium, but for a financial organization, it can be of high score. So they need to think for the countermeasures and deploy the countermeasures. So it is generally based on like how you assess that vulnerability for a particular organization. So that is the uh, idea to calculate this CVSS score. So that is the way you can go through this CVSS score. And then we also have the list of common vulnerability, that is we call CVE. So this is a public database maintained by Maitre organization. So So you can go and read on this website about all the different types of vulnerabilities, and you can also find vulnerability researcher and all the different kind of resources. So it is always good to go and explore on these websites. So that will give you more understanding rather than I am talking about those. So let's go back again on the slides. So you can identify. So what these different tools, vulnerabilities assessment tool does, they will download some like a list of vulnerabilities from these databases. And once they will scan the target system, they will compare the response, and then they will analyze it based on the vulnerabilities that they are present in their database that they have downloaded from these portals. So this is the vulnerability management life cycle, where the first uh, step is to identify the assets and create a baseline. So whenever we are performing this type of assessment, we need to set the scope of our assessment. So the first step is to identify which assets that we want to we want to perform the vulnerability assessment. So maybe we want to perform assessment for our web server and email servers, because it is not a good idea to go and scan all your infrastructure for the vulnerability. Maybe it can introduce some traffic which can cause availability issues and other security issues in the organization. So it is always good to set the scope and then perform the assessment. Maybe you can isolate those systems uh, from rest of your network and then perform the assessment after identifying the assets. So the next step is to perform the vulnerability scan. So you can use the tools like OpenVAS, Nessus, and Expose and perform the vulnerability scan. And then once you have performed the scan, it is always good to perform the assessment, risk assessment. So maybe you can based on the results, you can see the, yeah, this is there. It has a very weak password set or not a very good security configurations. So all those informations from the scan activity that you have performed, vulnerability scan, it can help you to perform risk assessment. And then you can identify that, yeah, this is the, let's say the threat is denial of service attack, or the threat is uh, from external attackers about the on our access control systems. And then this is our vulnerability. It has a way on my web server or email server, it has a very weak password set. So this is the vulnerability and this is the threat. So what can be the resultant risk? So maybe the resultant risk can be the system is compromised and the resultant risk is very high. because vulnerability is already present, and exposure is also high. So it can the threat can easily compromise the system, and it can steal a lot of information or even damage the email server. So that's why the resultant risk is very high. And then we need to set the priority. So this is of a very high priority because the resultant risk is very high. So after performing the scan, we need to assess the risk, and it also always help in performing the risk assessment, because the risk we calculate based on the, let's say, what are the threats that we perceive, and then what are the vulnerabilities present in our system, so that is multiplied with the threat, and then what kind of exposure the system has, and then we will assess the resultant risk. And then we need to propose the countermeasures that we also call remediation. So what can be the countermeasures? So maybe deploy the firewall or intrusion detection systems, and or let's say set the strong password for those systems, or set the multi-factor authentication. So these are the like countermeasures or remediations. And once you have done that, it is always again good to perform the scan again, so that you verify that the countermeasure is working effectively and it has mitigated that risk, or it has closed that vulnerability. And then always actively monitor. So security, as I mentioned earlier, it is not an end product, it is a continuous process. So you have to monitor your organizations continuously for any kind of new breach or a new vulnerability. So we deploy intrusion detection system, firewalls, and other kind of monitoring tools to monitor your organizations 24/7. So the vulnerability assessment phase, as I mentioned, examine and evaluate all your security misconfiguration, even physical security. It can you can examine, then identify the and prioritize your vulnerabilities, and also create a good vulnerability report. So you can go through and read that. So these are the vulnerability assessment tools. So Nessus, it is not free. Of course, it has a free trial version, but it is not a free tool. But this is also widely used by the organization. Nessus vulnerability assessment. OpenVAS, it is free, and you can. It has a community version, so you can use that. So in our second session, I will show how you can use OpenVAS to perform vulnerability assessment. And it is maintained by Greenbaum Network organization, which maintains this OpenVAS tool. And then we have GFI LangGuard, another vulnerability assessment tool. I have not used this, but I have used Nessus. Sorry. And OpenVAS, Nessus is the free trial you can use, but I will suggest you to use OpenVAS, and that is also widely used by many organizations. Even we used when I was working in the company internally, that we use this tool to perform a vulnerability assessment. So through all these things we will go, but I'm just giving an overview. So this is the general OpenVAS dashboard that it will look like. So here you can see that I have scanned my different systems that is in my virtual lab. So this is one system with the IP address 10.0.2.15, which I scanned, which is Windows-based system. So this is 10.0.2.8, which is Metasploitable tool, which is vulnerable virtual machine, and it is based on Linux. So it is purposely designed for learning these kind of vulnerability assessment and pen testing. So you can download Metasploitable 2, and it is very easy to use. You can also download Metasploitable 3, but you need to do some configurations, and you will have to run some script to effectively build it. But Metasploitable 2, it is very easy to just you need to import that in your virtual machine, and then you can use that. So I will show that. And this is purposely designed virtual machine for learning these kind of vulnerability assessment and pen testing uh, activities. And you can also scan your own system. Like, let's say if it is Kali, just provide the loopback IP address and it will scan your own system. But that is of no use. Just for the first time, you can test it, whether it is working or not, the tool is working or not. And then it will give you a report that I will show that later on, and it will provide the severity impact. So here you see that severity is 5.0 for my Windows 11 machine, and for this one it is still 98%. So it has not provided me the severity level. And for the loopback, it is just 6.4, but I'm not going to do that. So in your OpenVAS, there is a task wizard. I will show that, and you can set the IP address. So instead of 127.0.0.1, you can provide the IP address of your Metasploitable VM, and then click start scan, and it will take maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes to scan it comprehensively. And then it will give you a list of vulnerabilities, and also it will give you an option to export that in a PDF format or XML format, whatever you want. But it is good to export it in the PDF format, and then along with the severity level and countermeasures. So here you can see that it has given me like task by severity class, and then task with most high results. So when you will click on these, it will give all the list of vulnerabilities. I will show that later on. And then you can also, as I had mentioned, that it is always good to get a report back after performing the scan. So you can export all the results using this OpenVAS tool and get it into the PDF format. And then it will list with all the task that you have performed, and along with the different types of vulnerabilities, its severity, impact, criticality, and also along with countermeasures. So you can see this is just one example that you see here. It has, I just performed this scan yesterday, so it will also give you the date and everything. And then it will give you what are the vulnerabilities present. So operating system end of life detection. So operating system is reaching end of life, or it has already reached that stage. Then it has also identified the R login password list. So remote login is passwordless. So it has also identified, and it has provided the severity level 10 or high. And then the location, that is the port 513, which is running TCP. Possible backdoor is also present, and it has also provided the severity level high, and what is the location. So 1524 port. So all these results you can you will get it when you will perform the OpenVAS tool to perform vulnerability assessment. So I'm not going through this in Nessus because it has some limitations, because it is not completely free, but you can use that. It has some free trial limitations, but I would suggest to focus on one tool right now, because because tools will always go, and I mean a new tool will come, and also the previous tool that you were using, like let's say 1 year back or 2 year back, maybe in cybersecurity domain, it will go obsolete in next 6 months, or after 1 year or 3 year 2 years. So it is always good to have the foundations right, and understand the process behind these activities. So if you understand the process, and if you have the fundamentals of information security, cybersecurity, then these tools you can explore it. All these tools require some time that you need to devote to learn and see how it works. But the main thing is to understand the fundamentals and the process behind these tools and activities. Then always you can use one tool or another to perform these kind of activities. So this is just one Nessus scan that I performed. So any questions? So let's go through the questions. There are no questions. So if you have questions, let me know.
If anyone has question, please ask. Otherwise, we will meet at 12.
If you do not have questions, yeah, I will provide the PPTs. Don't worry. I'm making some changes. So NVD is a National Vulnerability Database, which is like maintained by NIST, and it maintains the list of vulnerabilities reported by different vendors or different security researchers. So here you can go and check more details. And just give me a second. I will share. So this is the National Vulnerability Database maintained by the NIST in the US. So it will have the list of all the vulnerabilities that it maintains, reported by different vendors, different security researchers. And it is also so when you are working as a security engineer in the organization or security manager, it is always good to keep exploring these portals. And also, if you are performing cybersecurity risk assessment, it is always good to go on these portals. And for, let's say, you are doing assessment for your systems, which also include Palo Alto firewall or Siemens switches in the topology. So you should go and check. Like, let's say you have some particular version, a specific version of Palo Alto switch or Siemens product, then go and check for the vulnerabilities in these public databases and see whether for a particular version that you have, whether there is any related vulnerabilities reported on these portals or not, and then use those insights while performing the risk assessment, because maybe your team doesn't know about those vulnerabilities, but your role should be to go on these portals and identify the vulnerabilities and use that in your assessment. So common vulnerable IPs, it depends, like in the operating system. So it can be your internal IPs or public IPs, depending on how your systems are secured, how much security that you have provided. So if you have not deployed firewalls, or your system has a very weak password set, so it can expose your system to public internet. So it depends. What is the most effective and cost-sensitive methodologies for conducting comprehensive vulnerability assessment in low-resource countries, considering limitations in data availability, technical? So the tools like OpenVAS, which is open source, you can use it when you are having limitations with the resources in terms of cost also. We have used the OpenVAS tool internally, and it is a good tool that it will give you all the list of vulnerabilities along with the countermeasures and the severity level that you can use to perform the further assessment in your organization. And it is free, so also it is that is one very positive point, that if the organization is limited by the resources in terms of money, because many companies they do not want to perform or spend a lot of money on security until they are targeted by some cyber attacks. So they think that, yeah, our main objective is to sell steel or make turbines or any other thing. So we should not invest much into security. But once they are impacted, then they start in spending money on cyber security. So in if you are limited by the resources, then it is always good to, yeah, like use some open source tools like OpenVAS that can help you in identifying the vulnerabilities, and also along with the countermeasures that it will propose, and then you can deploy those countermeasures. on which IP should you? So you should always do in the private IPs for the learning purpose the vulnerability assessment or pen testing, because this you should also think for legality of these things. So if you are performing some vulnerability assessment on some public IPs, like let's say you are sitting in the some cafe and you are performing vulnerability assessment on those uh, IPs that are listed there, and you are sending some probe packets, if they will identify that, they can report it, and you will be charged with uh, uh, for using these tools illegally. So it is always good to set up your own virtual lab, or if you in your university you can use in your own computer lab and perform these vulnerability assessment and pen testing. And it is also necessary to make sure that yeah, those labs are like segregated from the rest of the university network. Because if you are performing some vulnerability assessment or pen testing, and if you have, let's say, deployed some payload, maybe that can expose some systems vulnerabilities, or it can cause some damage to other networks. So it is always good to like use it in your own virtual lab or in your own computer lab in the university, which is isolated from the rest of the network. Any other questions? If you
Yes.
do not have any questions, then let's meet at 12.
Okay then. Thank you, Rishi sir. Again, we'll meet at 12 o'clock.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.